Loading.
I like your backdrop, Vance, by the way.
Thank you. In your honor.
All right, as always, are we live? I have no idea. Let's better refresh the page. See what I can see. What do you see, Vance?
We're live.
We're live.
We're live at 5. Somewhere in Hawaii or something, we're at 5.
There you go.
Somewhere in the world, it's 5.
There you go. Awesome. Why am I getting a commercial? I don't know. Well, as always, happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real. This is Aeon Byte Live from, I already forgot where I was. Yes, I'm, of course, in Chicago. And our guest today is Travis Edwards, live from Australia. Thanks for joining us, Travis.
Thanks for having me, Miguel. Great to be here.
Pleasure to have you. And of course, we've got live from California, we've got the Moondog Vance. How's it going, Vance?
Pretty copacetic today. Just saw the Joker, so I'm sufficiently rattled and excited and so forth.
There you go. Well, I'm sure people will as always, we'll be filling into the chat. I should repeat myself in a few things. But as always, this is episode 28. If you have questions, hello, Jasmine. Hola, ¿cómo estás? If you have questions, please put them in caps for Vance and I, and we will certainly get to you. The topic, of course, is Gurdjieff, the Gnosticism of Gurdjieff, and I think Travis will make the best case tonight. As always, this will be in audio format, will be released on iTunes, Patreon. Well, Patreon, no, it will be released on all the podcasters live, but AB Live members and patrons will get the full dope, as I say, plus a bonus. And I think you'll enjoy the bonus too, because it will be about Gurdjieff with some very cool guests from a past show. Other than that, thanks for being here. And as always, please support this podcast. 2019 was the best year for Aeon Byte. I think Vince and I brought you some excellent guests, some powerful topics for the millennium, for 2020, and for eternity. 2019, this year has been a little bit slow, so please support and always support any independent podcasters in this Philip K. Dick world in these strange times. So obviously I'll repeat myself because as always the chat will continue to grow as the show goes on. So we should start, before we get to Gurdjieff, we should start a little with you, Travis. We know for a fact that you're not a computer technician. So that's been Vince and I figured that out for the aborted show. But maybe tell us a bit about who are you and your journey into the esoteric realms.
Yeah, I'm very old school, Miguel, so I'm not great with tech, but man, I guess it started when about when I was 27, I started asking bigger questions like a lot of people do, and was unsure what I was doing in the mechanical sense of the word, as Gurdjieff would use that word. I felt very mechanical and very asleep. So I was working, a 9-to-5 job and was very dissatisfied. So I took a cue from a friend and went overseas and did some traveling and just started reading a lot of Gurdjieff and Steiner, all these kind of people, the occult or the esoteric people. A lot of Eastern stuff from yoga, obviously. Obviously, Gurdjieff had a big interest in the East as well. And from there, just sort of read a lot. But Gurdjieff's always been there for a long time. He's just one guy I haven't been able to put down. Started yoga and I still do that, but the Gurdjieff work and the Gurdjieff psychology is what really got me in, and I think that's really helped.
Awesome. Yeah, better take myself off mute. I think the audience says that the mic is too low, so maybe Travis, if you could speak up a little bit. That's what they're saying in the chat room. So when you speak, just scream like I am. How does he sound to you, Vince? Sounds fine to me.
He's low,
How's that
but
sound now?
Oh, that's better.
Yeah, that's
that
better.
okay?
Yeah.
All right, I'll just
Yes,
have to
that's
hold
better.
it.
Yeah, guys, let us know
Hold
in the
it.
chat how his volume is.
Yeah.
And there's a few lag. Again, if it continues, just we'll have you turn off your mic so it takes less drain on the Wi-Fi. And we'll get through with this, guy. We will not let Mercury take us down, or the Archons, or Waitico, or whoever's out there, or Jeff Bezos. I don't know who's out there, but we shall persevere. So I guess we should.
Araman, as Steiner would say.
There you go, Ariman Steiner. Yes, technology.
Yeah.
So I guess we should probably get to the main event. We should just get right to it. Gurdjieff, obviously influenced by Gnosticism, as I've heard. His interaction with the Yazidi, the famous story where he's looking at some kids. There's a Yazidi kid, and there's a Yazidi kid that they draw a circle around him because in that religion you can't leave the circle, and he became fascinated with this group. Is that how what influenced Gurdjieff? Or tell us what influenced Gurdjieff and just what is his Gnosticism?
Well, actually, what sort of solidified it for me was a book I bought secondhand by a woman called Margaret Anderson, and that solidified it in writing because I jumped out of my skin because I thought I knew it. In all the quotes that Ouspensky's relaying of Gurdjieff about the forces, unknown occult forces that we need to know that are affecting us. And in Hermeticism, that's called Hamamine, if I'm saying it right. It's the occult forces that work through the body and the mind. And Gurdjieff alludes to that a lot. And in my own life, I've experienced it a hell of a lot. But Margaret Anderson was one of the women who worked in a group of women who Gurdjieff called Ladies of the Road. It's very Gnostic of Gurdjieff. And Margaret Anderson's the only one who I've read the book, and she's explicitly speaking to someone. It doesn't say who, but she's verifying that Gurdjieff's work goes back to the Gnostics and the initiates of Egypt. And I was over the moon when I read that because it just solidified a lot of things, confirmed a lot of things. So the Yazidis and all that for sure, but also with his father in his book on meetings with remarkable men, he talks about his father. His father was a big influence. His father knew a lot, and this is where Gurdjieff was introduced to the Epic of Gilgamesh, which Gurdjieff says explicitly that was, in his terms, a spiritualizing factor for him for the rest of his life. And if you read the very difficult Beelzebub's tales, which is very interesting, that's a complete Gnostic mythos. Beelzebub, not a lot of people have really quick. If you look him up, he's one of these 7 devils, and quite a mischief angel. My understanding, Gurdjieff being so influenced by the Sumerian tradition, and especially the Epic of Gilgamesh, as he says in Gurdjieff language, spiritualizing factor for him, that really got him searching. And through other research, I feel that his chosen Beelzebub is actually kind of another rendition of Enki. Enki, the creator in the Sumerian text of the mankind, is coming through in incarnations. So we speak of humans having incarnations, but these gods and entities can too, but it's out of our comprehension. But Enki can be seen as an aspect of coming through as fire later on for the Gnostics. That takes a lot of research, but you can read Beelzebub's tales absolutely as a Gnostic mythos. It's amazing. One of the biggest insights in there that Beelzebub is telling Hassan is about the Hasnamasian so-called humans here that are not quite human on the earth. And Gurdjieff's actually quite horrifying to read. Gurdjieff talks about shocks waking people up. They need shocks to wake them out of this deep sleep. What Gurdjieff calls most of us are walking dead, really. Gurdjieff's quite haunting. And, the Gnostic, anyone reads Gnostic texts, it's quite haunting. It's a slap in the reality of what we've been told, by the church and the Roman Catholics and all their priesthood. And even in yoga, I was looking for the Gnostic stuff in yoga. And if you look through the yoga texts, it's there, but it's all those sages have hidden it, because as Castaneda said, this is the topic of topics, my friends. It was only reserved for the high initiates that could really kind of handle and understand these higher things. In shamanism, it's there. It's always been there, but in the yoga text, it's really suppressed. So this is why in the modern age now, you've got a lot of people having an interest in yoga, but a lot of it's very fluffy, and they don't understand that, there's a very serious side going on here. People haven't asked, why was yoga invented? Why was meditation invented? Yeah. You have to get beyond the meat sack and see, well, there's the divine pneuma is in us. The Gnostics are saying it, the yogis are saying it, but we've got interference of other forces that are really keeping us bound, So
you mentioning Castaneda. I was actually reading him this morning, his ideas of the predators coming to get us and taking us over, of course, and the shamans. People forget part of the job of the shaman was to protect the tribe from the evil spirits that could come and possess us and wreak havoc upon a culture. So, would you say Gurdjieff had an idea of evil spirits or ontological spirits, or was he just trying to fix these broken meat machines called humans?
No, he knew, but even in Gurdjieff, he was careful not to speak about a lot of this stuff. But in his book, The Herald of Coming Good, he speaks of a destructive force, and he makes up another weird Gurdjieff name called Svanahana or something like that. It's like TZVARNO something. Svanahano is like a force that comes in and just completely destroys all the good works that are being done by a group or individuals. It'll just come in. I think even Osho, who was a big fan of Gurdjieff, he would say that same force came in and ruined his thing he was doing in Pune in the States, and you can see, Osho, not to divert, but Osho identified as a Gnostic. He had one of the biggest libraries ever known by humans. Unbelievable, this guy, And
he wrote a really good book on Gnosticism.
He's identified.
Yeah, for sure.
So he knew, but this force came in and bang, put him down. So Gurdjieff definitely knew. And there's numerous amazing quotes in Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous where, he's talking about this. And it's always amazed me that no one's honed in on these in quotes and really looked at them. If I can share one off the top of my head, I can't remember what page it is, but he speaks about this when man is trying to awake, and he makes these efforts to awake, and he thinks he's awakening, he can fall back asleep very quickly. Now I can testify to this because it happens a lot. I've been initiated in a particular yoga technique, and the more you try, Gurdjieff has said explicitly in this quote that tenfold forces will come down on you, the same forces that had you in sleep in the first place. They come down tenfold, and it's nefarious how it happens. It happens through all sorts of means. You got no idea. It's full on. It's literally like the weight of the world. And I've experienced that a lot. I can tell you, it'll come through distractions, it'll come through frustrations, it'll come through something, agitating in your body, whatever will happen through mind and body to stop you from doing your practices or anything that Gurdjieff called the work. Anything that gets you getting higher, it's just going to keep coming. It's and in yoga, that energy they call the tamas, the inertic energy. So there's three forces. Gurdjieff spoke about the law of three, and tamas is one of the three gunas that they talk about in yoga. So you have the sattvic, which is the pure higher qualities, which you're trying to get through practice and the work. Then you've got rajas, then you've got tamas. And tamas is the heavy energic in psychological language. It's depression, it's just heaviness, and that's what it does. These tenfold forces come down, So when I read that about Gurdjieff, I was like, wow, that's similar to what Castaneda's saying. Yeah. And also, if people want to get a clearer idea to help highlight Gurdjieff's work, you've got to read Sri Aurobindo. He's the only yogi so far I know that has explicitly wrote a book called The Hidden Forces of Life. All through that book, he's saying the same things Gurdjieff has hinted at, but hasn't said in so many words, But that book by Aurobindo will give everyone a good idea.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. And of course, please feel free to talk as long as there is no time constraint, Travis, whatever you need to make your point. But I guess the question would be, how do you, since we're on the topic, how do you protect yourself from these really powerful gravitational forces that are trying to keep us down? I mean, I guess you would have to practice the fourth way, or are there what do you tell people where to start?
The thing about Gurdjieff, the main things that I've highlighted, and that hopefully I will share in the book I hope to write it in. The thing about Gurdjieff was the will, the human will. People can read Ouspensky and Bennett and Archons and all these guys, right? But they don't give a clear picture. What Gurdjieff was about was strengthening the human will, because as he says, people are machines. People cannot do. The chief source of evil, which I guess you could tie into the Eastern notion of karma, but the chief notion of evil for Gurdjieff was these, what he called unconscious, involuntary manifestations. Now, that ties into a whole heap of things here. It ties into the Hermetic Heimaman, which is the cosmic rule through all the elementals, through mind and body, because we're made of that, It's about strengthening the will. All aesthetic practices is about strengthening the will. Of course, Gurdjieff spoke about the fourth way is very old, as kind of an integration, but something that was more advanced than just the way of the yogi or just the way of the monk or just the way of the fakir. All these three are trying to strengthen the will in different ways. So Gurdjieff's trying to do an integration of all those three. And it's about the will. I think there's another quote in Ouspensky's book that, the evolution of man's consciousness is the evolution of our will. And just an interesting side note, I spent a fair bit of time studying German philosophy and German Romanticism, which is also underpinned with a lot of Neoplatonic Gnostic influence, which is fascinating. From Schopenhauer to Schelling to all those guys knew about this stuff. And the central theme there I found in the German esoteric tradition was the will. And they associated the human will, something with our spirit. There's a very close interconnection there with the inner pneuma and the will. And just another mention here, because Robert Assagioli, if anyone's heard of this guy, was a transpersonal, a psychiatrist. He was, I believe, influenced by Gurdjieff, and he's wrote a great thing anyone can find online on a PDF called Training of the Will. And you'll see a lot of Gurdjieff come through in that. It's an amazing thing. You should read it all the time. You can use it as a manual. And Assagioli, again, helps highlight Gurdjieff in everyday life. The practice of Gurdjieff is in everyday life. And you'll notice that the more you're trying to become, self-observing and strengthening your attention, which is what Gurdjieff said. He said, trying to do self-observation will drive you mad, and you'll realize that you actually can't do it. The idea is to strengthen the will of attention, because, and especially in this day and age, poor Gurdjieff would be horrified, because the attention span of people is, I don't know, like a toad, it's just not there. And people are just lost in especially in the technological age. People are just lost, and the attention is not there. One-pointedness, being present in the moment. So that's kind of my Gurdjieff trinity: the attention, the will, and also presence.
Interesting. And I guess
another quote.
Yeah, please do. Sorry.
Just quickly, yeah. There's
no problem.
there's an amazing quote you can find online. As Gurdjieff talks about, the majority of people you meet on the street are dead. They're actually dead. It's haunting, Then you got to think, well, what does he mean by dead? But you go out anywhere, go to a shopping mall, go somewhere, and people are so mechanical. They're mechanical in their body, in their body language, in their language. You just meet with them on the street, and it's like, you're looking for that something authentic to come out of the person, and a lot of times it's not there. A lot of time they're not really present with you when you meet. Gurdjieff had a huge presence. A lot of people have spoken about that, a huge presence. You felt it, but he was really there in whoever he engaged with. He engaged with a lot of different people, a lot of people, walks of life. He used to dish out soup to the poor. They used to line up all the time at some house. He did a lot of things, kind of like the whole Jesus thing. He had that there, and presence is a big thing. So there's a little formula I created is, that there's like a bit of a cycle of the attention, your will, and presence. And they all kind of create a little bit of an alchemical formula there. But for me, that's the crux of Gurdjieff's psychology. And that's how I came into Gurdjieff. And he's, for me, coming from a transpersonal psychology background, Gurdjieff's like the ultimate transpersonal therapist, counselor. He basically said, like Buddha said, we're all on a spectrum of being mentally ill, the human race. Buddha said that, and people, you got to dig up the text to find that. But the Buddha spoke about our mind having defilements, and Gurdjieff's saying the same thing in Beelzebub, speaking as Beelzebub to Hassan. I think there's a chapter about, he calls human beings your favorites, your three-brained favorites, creation, but also the psychopathology of your favorites. I mean, he's gone beyond Freud and all these kind of guys. So we have to ask, what's made us such deranged animals? What's made? Gurdjieff knew, the Gnostics knew, or any school that's come from that Alexandria, Egypt, which is basically, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, or Neoplatonism, all rubbing shoulders together. That's definitely Gurdjieff's hub. That's where he's come from, and he's learned the same insights that all those sages and initiates have learnt. And he was a high initiate, Gurdjieff, from what I've understood. He was very high.
Well said and agreed. Yes, the insight is that the machinery has been created to keep us asleep, to bring us down and make us slaves of some sort of system, some sort of managerial class, and the solution is spiritual. So yeah, and it's interesting. I'm reading some of the comments there, Travis, and it seems maybe Vance agrees it's split between people who really like Gurdjieff and people who don't like him so much.
Yeah, I
think he's a shyster, a chiseler. So maybe Travis will have to deal with those, or Vance will ask a question. But before that, I like somebody said, is there an app for willpower? But that's a question probably a lot of people still misunderstand is, what is will, Travis? It's not the same, not really willpower. It's something different. Maybe tell the audience so we can clarify.
It's a mystery, man. It's the will. The will has been very enigmatic principle in humanity, and it took me a lot of study. But the German guys really helped highlight that for me, because they were really focused on that. And if you look at the I've spent time in academia. It was very frustrating because in academia, mysticism and esotericism is snuffed out, so you don't have the old school way of the Platonic mystery schools that Plato set up, that Plotinus set up, all these amazing guys. It's totally different now. It's totally rubbish academia. They've snuffed it out. But you've got the English school of philosophy that came through, and basically materialists, right? Hume and all those guys. And then you had on the other side the Germans, who were actually the spiritual current of Western philosophy. And the main thing going through the Germans was obviously the unconscious, which is where Jung and Freud took all their stuff from. But the will, the idea of the will was there. It's highlighted in Heidegger, who, as we know, Hans Jonas, in the last epilogue of his book, The Gnostic Religion. Amazing.
Yeah, great book.
There's definitely links there. Existentialism, Gnosticism, it's there. But Heidegger, in one of his books, highlights that all through that tradition, the will is there from, the mystic Jakob Boehme actually influenced a lot of them. Hegel, Schopenhauer, it's obviously there, big in Schopenhauer. Friedrich Schelling, who wrote a book, Ages of the World, which is his Gnostic period. You've got it in Nietzsche, obviously, the will to power, which obviously got really deformed and misinterpreted by the world. In a nutshell, you can say that Gurdjieff's ideas are similar to Nietzsche's in the will to power. I've read that the will to power is the will to bring about the good over, it wasn't about any Hitler kind of weird stuff that people have tried to paint on Nietzsche. It was really about the will, and Nietzsche's taking this from the German tradition, But like I said, it's associated with the inner divinity. Getting back to Robert Assagioli, people can check this out. He had an amazing conceptualization of the self, okay? That it was a cross between awareness and the will. And I really studied that, and then I looked at it, I thought, he's really bang on there, because even in the Eastern tradition, the ideas of the self, you've got Shiva and Shakti. Now, Shiva is the ultimate awareness, and you got Shakti, which is like the energy and making stuff manifest, and that's the will, right? You got Shiva, Shakti. So Assagioli, being a very vast reader, you've got awareness and the will. And if you study humans and human nature, and I can vouch myself, you got people that are very spiritually orientated and some that are less. You'll notice that people who are spiritually orientated, they've got a high awareness, but their will is not strong. And I'm one of them. I can be pulled away by a lot of distractions. I don't have strong willpower yet. I'm still building that. So it's out of balance. You've got the general Hasnamasian people, as Gurdjieff would say. They've got strong will. You got the everyday 9-to-5 workers. You got people who they're mechanical and they're asleep, but they've got actually a strong will. It's hard to see this. People get stuff done. They can do things. They can do things they want, no matter how trivial it is. They've got a strong will to do. A lot of the spiritually inclined people don't have a strong will. So you'll see why people like myself get into spirituality, get into yoga. We're doing that to strengthen our will. We've got a pretty good awareness, which can still grow and get stronger and deeper, till we're liberated or enlightenment and all this stuff. But the willpower is not there. And you simply see it on the street. So we've got an imbalance there of the self, of awareness and willpower. And like Gurdjieff said, there's absolutely no willpower in people. You're pulled from post to pillar, like you're in an ocean. And you've just got no resilience there and the will. Absolutely, no doubt. So you can enjoy all the esoteric hoorah of Gurdjieff and that, but at the end of the day, he's a very practical guy. He had powers. Okay, I'm rambling, but I think it's Fritz Peters where there's a story about being in the kitchen. I think it was him. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was very ill. He had he had headache and all this stuff. And Gurdjieff was there, And Gurdjieff said, drink a strong cup of coffee. And then this guy explained that he felt like this, all of a sudden, his illness and stuff going away. But then Gurdjieff looked like he was getting very crook. So what Gurdjieff has done is what any really high advanced initiate or yogi can do is they can take that energy or transform a Shakti energy into his disciple. He can absorb it into him because he's got the capacity to do it. Gurdjieff went into another room for about 15 minutes, laid down, came back, good as gold, jovial as ever. And I was like, wow, that's an amazing story. You know? And nobody talks about that, Nobody talks about it. Amazing.
Amazing. Well, that's, yeah, I love it. Thanks for the clarification on the will, especially when you count it with Shiva and Shakti. Shakti.
Yeah.
Hope I'm saying that right. Well, now it looks like the chat room is very animated. Good to see some of the regulars, John Barker, Nate the Occult Fan, all the other guys. Thanks for being here again. We have Travis Edwards discussing the Gnostic Gurdjieff here on Aeon Byte Live. So now we want to hand it over to Vance. Do you have a question, or you want to, does the audience have some questions for Travis, whether you maybe one pro, one negative, and we'll go from there? Take it away, Vance.
Yeah, yes to all of that. Here's an interesting one. When the first chat asked, didn't Gurdjieff think his attempts to train people in his ways, the fourth way, failed?
Yeah, well, when Gurdjieff was on his deathbed, he basically said, "I've left you all in a very fine mess." So it's easy. I'm not sure, what the listener might be alluding to, whether he's sort of, the charlatan accusations on Gurdjieff at all. I wrestled with that for a while too, but the fourth way is very hard to understand. But it's a very ancient practice which has gone back to Alexandria, which it's really lost to us. So Gurdjieff's, he was like a perennialist. There's so many streams come through in Gurdjieff. Buddhism, shamanism, everything. Most traditions come through. So it's hard to get a grasp of what the fourth way is. And I think only the really close people to Gurdjieff understood it, because initially it was only, like a lot of esoteric traditions, it was only handled down orally. Okay, so the yoga I've been initiated into, you won't find the methods in books and stuff. I'm sorry, and I myself am sworn to secrecy. It's and in the mystery schools, this was taken very serious. So everything was handed down orally. It was only through some other change of events that things had to be written down, and sort of Gurdjieff did know this as well, and he left his works to Jeanne de Salzmann, okay, the French woman, to put into writing. She was the main one. If anyone wants to get a clearer idea, you have to, Ouspensky and all that aren't going to give it to you, to be honest. It's the women. You've got to read the Margaret Anderson book, which is called the Unknown Gurdjieff, I think it's called. That's an amazing book. Jeanne de Salzmann encouraged Margaret to write that book, because she said, I can't write a book on Gurdjieff. It's, how insane for me to think I can do that. And Jeanne encouraged her to do it. And if you read that book, it's amazing. It doesn't have all the other stuff that Ouspensky and stuff are thrown in there. You get a real essence of Gurdjieff through Margaret Anderson's book. It's there, it's amazing. Gurdjieff worked with these women directly in the Ladies of the Ropes. So something comes through there. You can get a real essence of the work there. But I say to people, you can read about the fourth way till the cows come home. It's not going to do it. It's like anything. You have to experience it. So if you have it in your mindset that this is what you like and you want to apply it, and it's definitely applicable to today, eventually you'll see in everyday life that it's going to come out, and you're going to start realizing, oh, okay, this is what's happening now. I've got to turn on my work mind instead of my, get out of the neurotic mind, turn on work mind. And in everyday life, the Gurdjieff work is there for you 24/7, because, the forces that want to keep man asleep, they don't take any time off. So, if you want to have the work brain, you got to work 24/7. You got to go
Did he
to bed.
say? Yeah. Did he say it was that his way was the only way, or where did he say where he got his knowledge of the fourth way from? Did anybody no connections or?
I don't no, I don't believe that he said that my way is the only way at all, because that's nonsense. There's many ways to become awake or enlightened. As you know, it's some people have had just spontaneous openings, which is very rare. No, the Gurdjieff's way is from the initiates. So, like Margaret Anderson said, we're going back to Egypt. Gurdjieff always referred to Egypt. Now, esoterically, also, in texts, Egypt used to refer to the earth, not so much Egypt, the country, but the earth and the body. We're in this meat sack, but it's only in this meat sack that we can get to the pneuma, So that's why in Buddhism and Hinduism, having a human birth is always prized, etc. But, there's a quote by Gurdjieff saying that the men or the beings who sent him
Aha.
are far greater than what he is,
Aha. Somebody sent
incomprehensible.
him. He's
Now,
like an alien
we
agent.
yeah, man. He was an agent for the good, Now, I'm still unpacking Beelzebub's tales, but that is a Gnostic Bible for us. Absolutely. You've got to buy it. But you might go mad. You'll get very frustrated. There's a lot of hard language. Gurdjieff wasn't great um, at writing. He could great. So he would relay Beelzebub's tales. And now Gurdjieff, being as amazing as he was, nearly did his own head in, rewriting Beelzebub over and over, because he didn't want it to be easy. He called it burying the bone. You have to dig, 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 dig. He was a bit of a bugger like that. But he said that it's called the All and Everything series. And he said, everything we need to know is in Beelzebub's tales, but you're going to have to work your ass off. You're going to have to read this book consciously, okay, and not thinking about what I'm having for dinner or my girlfriend or any other bullshit like that. You have to be one-pointed reading Beelzebub, and you have to use like an intuitive reading to tap in, because everything you want to know is there. Now, he's using secret aliases in that book, like Ashiata, Shia and all these crazy names. I don't know who that is yet. I'm still unpacking it, but he's referring to beings that have come. Some people have said it might have been Hermes, Trismegistus. But it's a Gnostic tale. He's got divine messages coming through, trying to wake us up from the human, the earthly parasites, he's calling them, which are the Hasnamasian individuals that have created pseudoscience, pseudo-education, So we come through each incarnation cycle from the fresh seed. We are like a blank slate, but we come through with a stronger potential. So Gurdjieff is also, you can say in a nutshell, the first teacher of human potential, because every time human potential keeps getting crushed by the sleep of this world, those divine messengers he speaks about in Beelzebub are coming through. He's got Muhammad, he's got Buddha, he's got other people in there. This is an amazing Gnostic tale. But the Hasnamasians, these are human parasites. They've got very little soul essence, as Gurdjieff would say. An interesting thing here, guys, is that he spoke about essence and being very much in the same way as the Neoplatonists. The language is very similar to Plotinus and very similar to Proclus, one of my favorites, actually. And if you read any of the Neoplatonic texts, the depiction of the soul by Plotinus is the best that I've ever read. It's the most legible to the Western mind. And Gurdjieff uses essence in the same thing. So he uses essence and personality, Gurdjieff, and basically he's saying personality is socially constructed by the Hasnamasian education and just pseudo rot that we've fed from day one by these people, these soulless people. You've got, you're trying to hang on to essence, what's original to you. So you've got essence and personality, and you'll see in I think Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous, that features quite a bit in some of the chapters. But Gurdjieff wanted to crush all the falseness or the egotism of you, or all the human vanity, everything that's given to you, and some people didn't respond very well to that in the groups, they, especially because he was big on group work, that used to bring out the beast. As Plotinus text talks explicitly about the human body being the beast, this beast that we need to attend to. Gurdjieff was the same. I think he's got another analogy about, the remarkable man is the man who can balance the sheep and the wolf within. There's another tale about the sheep, the wolf, and the cabbage. But basically, we've got these double natures that we have to balance. And there's a quote I found from Plotinus in the Enneads, which says the same thing, that as souls, we were pure spirit from the pleroma, you would say. But Plotinus says the same thing as Castaneda, that another being came through and overlaid itself on us. He says that
Really?
in the
Wow.
Enneads. And I was
Mr.
like,
Plotinus,
wow.
non-dualist.
Oh, Plotinus. Yeah,
Ooh.
I was blown away.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yep. Now, if I can get the reference right, I think it's in Enneads, I think part 6, and it's like, he has sections, I think section 14 or something, If people want it, I can find it for them.
Yeah, just email it to me later on. Email it to me later on and share that Plotinus had his own demiurge.
Hey, look, yeah,
Yaldi Baldi.
Yaldi Baldi. The Neoplatonists, they knew all about that, but I think my favorite is Proclus, because he's one of the ones that really honed in on evil and what it is. And getting back to Gurdjieff and essence, the whole thing Gurdjieff's pointing out is that deadened people have really lost touch of the essence, which you can equate with soul. Okay, now Proclus speaks about evil as very similar to the Gnostics, parasitical existence. Okay, but he speaks of two types, of the body and of the mind, of the psyche. And he says the psyche is the worst because what it does is perpetuates evil in the soul continuously. You'll keep degrading yourself. It's the worst kind to allow to happen, and that'll just eat away at essence, and you just you lose the light in yourself, and you're just a dead walking biological machine. So,
Miguel, do we have time for another question?
Then keep the questions coming. I know the audience is very passionate about this. I'll just stand back and let you take over.
Yeah, we got a question about Jung. What do you know about Jung's opinion of Gurdjieff? Carl Jung.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah, fascinating. Great question, actually. Not sure how many people know, but there was a guy called Maurice Nicole, who wrote some very amazing psychologies. I think the book's in 3-part series, commentaries on Gurdjieff and Ouspensky's psychology. Maurice Nicole was a British man who was a student of Jung. He was with Jung. But interesting enough, he ditched Jung and went to Gurdjieff and went and worked with Gurdjieff in Paris and stayed with him, which is fascinating. There is some speculation that Jung and Gurdjieff temporarily met. I can't find anything to really vouch for that, but Jung definitely met up with a lot of people that were renowned, so to speak. So I'm not sure whether they actually met or not, but Maurice Nicole was with Jung, but kind of ditched that and went to Gurdjieff and stayed with Gurdjieff and was enthralled with everything Gurdjieff did and wrote these really, they are quite useful commentaries on Gurdjieff's psychology.
One of our viewers here, let's see, who was this? Oswald Spengler had a quote in the chat saying basically that Jung couldn't be bothered with Gurdjieff's teachings, and and he recommended you may as well do this or this. I'm not going to read the quote in its entirety here, but have you heard of that? that Jung dismissed Gurdjieff?
No, I haven't heard that. Look, it wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. Jung had his own thing going on. My critique of Jung, actually, I studied Jung in my transpersonal studies. There's not much usefulness of Jung actually in this day and age. Some just diluted and made into really fluffy psychologies, oh, the shadow and the unconscious and all this stuff, and all the little reductionist archetypes, which is nonsense. It's really limited. You can't apply much of Jung's psychology to everyday stuff like you can with Gurdjieff. And the thing with Jung, he's a little bit of a cheeky bum. He used a lot of stuff from Neoplatonism. Obviously, he was interested in the Gnostics, but he didn't have access. He didn't do a great work like Hans Jonas did. He stole a lot of stuff from William Blake. He was sort of pinching stuff. So people can sort of, if people are like Jungians, and rich Jungians, and want to sort of dismiss Gurdjieff, it's a bit nonsense, because Gurdjieff was sort of bringing a very legitimate esoteric stuff through. Jung didn't have that background. He just read books and was interested in alchemy and pinched the unconscious stuff from the Germans, from Schelling, from Jakob Boehme, William Blake, all these guys. So you just can't apply Jung to everyday life. I mean, the shadow is so, what do you mean in the shadow? I mean, it's, you read something like Plotinus, you think, oh, okay, just before Jung, So it's like, we've got to get back to the roots. Jung was studying all these guys, he was reading these guys, and then he tried to pinch it all and paint it as his own stuff. Gurdjieff didn't do that.
So he's not an initiate. In other words, he wasn't a primary source, is what you're saying.
No.
Yeah, he was
No,
more academic, and maybe he drew on some of his own inner spiritual experiences, though, if you can believe the Red Book.
Look, the most fascinating thing about Jung is the Red Book and the Dead. So, but that's Jung's own trip, that's his own journey and unfolding. It doesn't do us any kind of service to read that and try to think that we're going to get some kind of experience out of what he experienced, because you won't.
I mean, he wasn't trying to teach anybody from it, for sure, right? Because he hid it.
No, it's definitely his thing. And he definitely said, you've got to go find your own dead.
Hey, we got a Crowley question too.
Dead that I've met. Oh,
yeah.
Crowley.
Crowley. What about Crowley and Gurdjieff? How's that working?
It wasn't working. I heard that Gurdjieff really disliked Crowley. I thought he was a despicable man. Actually, look, that's a whole different thing. Actually, if someone wants to read anything about this, there's a guy called oh God, what's his name? Peter, is it? I always get his name mixed up. Peter or Phil. I'll send it to Miguel, but he wrote, you can Google this. The book's called Three Dangerous Magi. Okay, and this Phil, I think it's Phil, starts with M. I don't know, but he's right. It's a big, very big book. It's about 1,000 pages of Gurdjieff, Osho, and Crowley.
Whoa, what a trio!
That's good. Yeah, that's a good set, huh?
And it's cool, man. I wanted that book for ages, and I bought it. It's a very big book, but he goes through what made them controversial, and I think some comparisons between the three men. Obviously, like I said, Osho was a big fan of Gurdjieff and was using Gurdjieff's practices in his in his ashrams and stuff. Crowley's a whole different kettle of fish. I'm on the fence with Crowley, he was definitely influenced by the Gnostics, but he was really pushing the boundaries there of what he was practicing. So white magic, black magic, the darkest man in England, he was definitely playing on that. I like a lot of that about Crowley, but he's a different guy from Gurdjieff. That's not to say that Gurdjieff was a complete Puritan either, because he wasn't. That's for sure.
Well, the methods were different too, right? Gurdjieff wasn't into all the magic symbology and hocus pocus and dramatic things, except that to shock his followers, I suppose.
Yeah.
Shock his followers into being awake. We got so many questions.
Got a shock.
Yep,
that's. All right, let's have another one.
Yeah. Here, let's flip to the practical. Chad Warren wants to hear. He had a couple of questions. He wants to hear from you about things that you have gone from Gurdjieff's teachings that have helped you, like a specific example of a goal that you've set and achieved it with, the fourth way, or, or something we can test in daily life, something like that.
You're frozen in time, Travis.
Yeah, he's thinking.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he'll jump back. Yeah, just when we get to the exciting question, let's
see if his willpower can break the network open again.
Yeah.
Travis, come back to us. Turn your video off.
Yeah. We might have to tell him to turn his video off, because now we're getting to the real practical stuff.
Or tell the guy next door to stop watching his streaming video.
Yeah. Get off Netflix, young lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just watching because Travis, he's got the wife beater and the water bottle. I'm like, Australia, you're enjoying the middle of summer where I'm freezing my ass off of over here.
Hey, Miguel, did you ever, while we're waiting for Trav to come back, here he is.
There you go. He's returned.
Yeah, you were gone for a while.
Wow. Did you like that? That was my vanishing act.
We thought you'd been kidnapped by some youngins who were mad at you.
Right.
Back your house.
No, we asked you for a practical example of fourth way, and you used your willpower to dissolve the network. Right. So, what was the answer to that? What can you give Chad here that will show him how you use the Gurdjieff's teachings?
Yeah, it's definitely about the will. I think as it comes through, I shared this quote with Miguel a little while ago about a quote that I've remembered off the top of my head. The sort of people that are doing the work, you've got goodwill and ill will. So something seems to happen very strange between people. How does the quote go? Gurdjieff saying, sort of invokes in himself, a strength of goodwill and whatnot. It's going to ignite in other people a proportionate degree of ill will, and that sort of ties in whole again to the Hermetic armor, or the old notion of the demiurge was working through the people in the Greek translation. So with your friends or family members or anything, that it's gonna want to test you, and that also ties into the notion of turning the other cheek. That's what that turning the other cheek is really about. So it's Gurdjieff is saying, a remarkable man is a man who can control not only the unpleasant manifestations that want to come out of himself, but also that are coming out of other people, and where you won't be reactionary. So the biggest thing I've learned there is to strengthen your response to that. You've got an awareness that this is what it is. You're going to be tested to play those unpleasant manifestations, but also not react to those coming to you from another person. That's the biggest thing. That's all probably the crux of Gurdjieff's teaching too, because he was not so much about suppressing negative emotions, but definitely not about displaying them. You don't want to suppress them, but you want to be able to become the master of that. you know.
That reminds me of something I was going to ask you about. I'm sure you've heard of the analogy of the driver and the coach and the horses. Was that one
Yes.
a big? Maybe you could tell us about that. And I'm thinking of that because of the will. That was his metaphor on how the will works, right?
So that was an analogy Gurdjieff used, wasn't it?
Yes.
He used that story. Yeah, yeah. I can't remember it fully off the top of my head, but we're basically saying that there's no real I there. There's no driver. Yeah, there's no driver there. So there's something being driven. You know, there's mechanisms being driven, but there's actually no driver there. There's no real I. Now, just another interesting thing to tie in with that is Gurdjieff, the psychology there. It's got a great there's no real I, okay? And we've got this whole legion of eyes. We're changing every moment. You know, one eye is this, one eye is that. You know, we desire something. Man is changing every 10 minutes, basically, he's saying, you know. So there's no real permanent, there's no solid driver there in the car kind of thing. You know, for me in studying Gurdjieff's work, that real driver is tied in with the will. And really trained to be strong-willed and resilient, like I said, not respond to certain things and whatnot. You're going to have a real I that's, if you recall, he used the word crystallized a lot. In Beelzebub's tales, he uses it a lot, you know, crystallized in their beings, and, you know, all the mysterious organ kunda buffer that was been, you know, detrimental to us since. But you've got to crystallize that real I within yourself, which is the will. It's the will. It starts with your attention, training the attention, and getting that will crystallized inside. That's the real I. That's what's there. And then when you've got that crystallized, then you've got you're more awake. You're not dead. You're more present. You actually got presence there. You know. That's how I see it.
Then the driver gets out of the coach, and on top of the coach starts taking the reins and like starts looking around. Maybe did he go that far, or we're doomed?
Yes. Well, that's the thing. You can be the one that's not sort of pulled, you know, from post to pillar by all the different influences, and you know, Gurdjieff spoke a lot about influence. So we've got thin water and those basic things, but there is the non-physical, the impressions that are coming through the senses, that are coming through all the elementals, you know, which is coming through Hamar mind. Now, Gurdjieff's a great example of this kind of guy, because in the Gnostic language, what a philosopher was the pneumatic. Hans Jonas makes a great, you know, his Gnostic book, that the Gnostic called a philosopher in the Gnostic era was a pneumatic person, same as the Neoplatonists, which means that they weren't swayed either way by misfortune or fortune or gifts from Zeus. You know, they weren't getting suckered into any gifts from Zeus. They were very stoic, staying centered. They weren't pulled either way by Hamaman. You know, they didn't care, like misfortune, joy, sorrow. They stay the same. And that's the pneumatic man. You know, he was above the Hamaman, as Jonas says. Okay, he's hovering about here. The general people are down here, and they're pulled post to pillar by Hamaman daily, 24/7. The pneumatic man, the Gnostic man, he's sitting above that. He's non-reactionary. Okay, he's got control of the impressions, the manifestations that are floating around him. He's not biting. He's not biting. He's staying resolute in the will and navigating. Lao Tzu talks about this in the Tao Te Ching. You know, it's all there in the Eastern stuff as well. It all comes back to Hamar, you know, forces through the body and the mind. It's quite a big concept, actually. I hope that helps.
Great. Yeah, that's good. We have a lot of interest here in the chat room, and that pretty much takes care of most of the questions. There's a lot of stuff going in there. Miguel, what are you thinking right
Cool.
now?
What am I thinking? I was talking about the driver in the car. I was thinking of the Pointer Sisters and that song. I'm driving. I don't. You know me. Don't let me sit there alone thinking, because the dumbest things look. And yeah, Robin Williams made fun of it in one of his specials. Ha, ha, ha. I'm driving. Never mind. But yeah,
Awesome.
Hermione. You're talking about fate too, right? The dark power of fate
Yes.
that controls us.
Yes.
That's what the one thing that the Greeks, the Romans, and even the gods feared was fate. And of course,
Yeah.
in the Gnostic Gospels, in the secret book of John, Yaldabaoth creates fate, but he
Mm.
creates her as more powerful than him. That's his anger against humanity. He's so pissed off at humanity and at Sophia that he's like, I'm going to make a bigger, badder, person than I am, and that'll show you. So it's interesting how this concept of fate is, and actually,
It's
yes,
like
I
the
did.
idea of karma,
Yeah, oh yeah, in India, I remember, was it
which I got a big
one
problem with
person
karma.
in India
Yeah.
said, I'm not afraid of death, but I'm afraid of karma. Same thing, right,
Yeah.
Travis?
Yeah. Same thing. It's the Hermetics, Neoplatonists who were using fate. Um, yeah. Yeah. What do? It's um, you'd be more conscious of it, but this is the determinism that's been put into place. It's the machinery of the universe. Eh, Look, there's I've read through Aurobindo that there's a very advanced yogi Aurobindo, but and a cult yogi, which is great. He gives us a lot of insight, which is very necessary. He goes into this and he was saying, that karma, it's there obviously, but there's karma that can be changed and there's karma that can't be changed. So it really depends on what work you do on yourself. If you're fortunate to come in across a great master, a great teacher who can also help tweak the reins a little bit for you, you're lucky, But otherwise, yeah, we're at the mercy of that. Um, it's amazing how it's true, but I mean, sort of, a lot of Western philosophy. Part of my work too has been to unpack the esoteric undercurrents, which is in a lot of Western philosophers, but the Husnermassian academia people have snuffed that out. So even someone like Spinoza, there's a guy, I can't remember his name, but he's got a website called he's sort of contrasting Spinoza and Gurdjieff, and he's using those guys, and they're his main influence. Now Spinoza, he's a funny one, but hard to unpack. But he's definitely coming from the Neoplatonist tradition, and he's pointed it out himself. And Spinoza's main take, though, is we are totally determined beings, and it's very hard to break out of that. But he's got his own gnosis going on there too, Spinoza. He talks in God, when he was alive, 16th century language or whatever, of blessedness. He had his own gnosis. There was a guy called Neil Grossman who wrote a book called The Spirit of Spinoza or something, and he says something that I intuited with Spinoza too, that he had some kind of a Gnostic awakening, So, um, the Gnostics and the Neoplatonist, they would talk about the intellect as being a higher principle of the soul of the psyche, but you've got this dry explanation of what the intellect is, or intellectualism. But in these esoteric traditions, the intellect was associated with the nous, yeah, the nous, the noetic intelligence, and that's how I reshape Spinoza. He's talking about the intellectual love of God, and you think, well, geez, that sounds a bit kind of strange. How can you have an intellectual love of God? If you change that into the noetic love of God, suddenly you can see Spinoza opening up, because Spinoza also spoke about the higher form of that being intuition. Okay. And you got to remember that Spinoza was considered a heretic of his time.
Yeah, kicked out of his synagogue.
Yeah, and he was in his political treatise. He's calling out the monarchs. He's calling out all the same Husnermassian religious controllers of the Judeo-Christian scene. But I dug up some interesting quotes, not to get off Gurdjieff, but Spinoza spoke highly of the Christ, but he just was not into organized religion, and he was touting free, that the people of Amsterdam and whatnot should be allowed to have free thought, and should not be free thought should not be controlled. So a Gnostic is definitely a free thinker. There's no doubt about that. So
Amen to that. Yeah, the question I think I saw was Common Sense Philosophy. Ask, do you recommend any particular Gurdjieff group if somebody goes looking?
Not really.
Yes, give away your free will. Give your will to the group. Forget about yourself, right?
Maybe it's a
problem with
test.
The problem with those groups is you've got a lot of ego in there, and you've got a lot of people that don't really understand what Gurdjieff was talking about. So unless you can find someone that's going to come down, some family lineage or something of people who were directly associated with Gurdjieff, so any of the ladies of the rope, or even if there's anyone related to Ouspensky, if anyone, you've got to have someone who's really got a proper insight. Otherwise, it just becomes a chat group, really. And the thing is, what you'll find, because Gurdjieff was so big on group work, and I've done a lot of group work myself in my transpersonal work, is that it brings out the beast. It brings out all those masks and tears it off. So you have to have someone who's a really strong facilitator of a group, that's going to be able to manage all the unpleasant manifestations that are going to explode from every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the group, because it's going to come out. The beast comes out. It doesn't want to be seen. It gets seen. It gets gnarly. It gets projective. It gets accusatory. Yeah, it's huge. It's like it's like a drama show in there. So I don't really advocate any Gurdjieff groups. You can just do the work yourself. There's a book I want to recommend here, is a book by a guy that calls himself Red Hawk. It's one of the most useful books you will find, and it's just called Self-Observation by Red Hawk. Really, really cool book. Really cool book. A lot of psychological focus in there. He makes a lot of nice little comparisons with Castaneda and the shamanic stuff. It's a really nice read. It's really short chapters, so you can sit on that book and you can chew on that for a day. One little chapter, you can apply that to the day and just focus on that. And it's really, really useful book, really practical. It's a nice small book. It's inexpensive. A guy in Portugal recommended it to me, and I jumped on it, and I've made a mess of it. I'm going to have to buy another one, because I've got so much highlights and notes and stuff in there that I've studied that thing. That guy really gets it. He really gets it. He puts it into a modern way where we can use it, for sure.
What was the book again? Red Hawk?
It's by Red Hawk. His name is pen name is Red Hawk, and it's just called Self-Observation.
Better write it out here.
And I highly recommend everyone to get that.
Awesome.
He talks about the neurotic mind, as Castaneda might say, the flyer's mind, and the work mind, which is the Gurdjieff work. You're switching into work mind, and it does not at all read like a new age book. It's nothing rubbish like that. It's really practical. It's hard hitting. It's going to strengthen your attention. You can put into place the practice of the will, and it's a really amazing manual. It's great. I pick it up so many times still. It's still one of the best books, no doubt.
I'll definitely have to check it out. And here's a question that you had. You're writing your notes, and of course, this is important. We haven't touched upon this, Travis, but as you wrote in your note, we are food for the moon, not the moon itself, but the beings. Could you unpack that a bit?
Yeah. Well, this is the shamanic parallels in Gurdjieff, because like shamanism, the organic three, well, actually all planets are live beings, and especially the Earth, the sun and the moon have this interesting correlation with each other, but they're living beings, and Gurdjieff subscribed to that. Absolutely. The moon's a funny one. He's got his idea of what made me sort of understand that a little bit more, because we can see that when there's a full moon, crazy stuff happens with humans, so there's definitely something to be said for it. But I was reading this South African shaman who's still alive, I think. The guy that David Icke pinched all his stuff from, the Zulu shaman. God, I can't remember his name now. Some people might know his name. Credo Mudwa. When I heard about Mudwa talking about this, he was talking about in shamanic language what the Archons might be called the Chitari. And in a lot of the African shamanic traditions, they've got the mythos is very similar to the Gnostic mythos, but he talks about these beings, that the hub in the shamanic Zulu tales, that the hub for these beings was the moon. That was their hub. In a lot of the myths, that the moon was hollowed out, and these beings are residing there, and they basically feed off the earth. Now, it sounds really far out there, but when you read Beelzebub's tales, you can intuit that there's something similar going on there, because Gurdjieff is talking about, the Kunda buffer and these different organs, or something happened along the way that changed us. So you've got Zachariah Sitchin wrote all those books about, DNA manipulation, which he's taken from the Sumerians and all this stuff. I don't know. Something's gone on though, hasn't it? Something's gone awry, and here we are. Gurdjieff would say that man, he talked about man in brackets, not a real man, but us general men. We were evolved to a certain point and then left to work it out for ourselves, basically, this fine mess that we've been in. And it is a fine mess, but we've got guiding powers that somehow is keeping all this chaos together. We don't know what it is, but look, the Zulu tales say that the moon is inhabited by these beings, and that's what affects us. So I thought it was a bit far out, but then when I read Beelzebub's tale, it's there. He's talking about all the archangels that were basically having something to do with our creation. Archangel Louis Moss or something strange like that, which I think he is possibly referring to the Sumerian stuff again, because, the Epic of Gilgamesh, like I said, was a spiritualizing factor that stayed with him. He was trying to work out what the hell that was about, listening to his uncle and his dad fight about that text. They were fighting about it for hours. They were talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh. But for Gurdjieff, that was a big thing, and I really think he's used that I think he's discovered more truths along the way as he traveled through Central Asia, all the way through, Egypt, India. That man did some legwork, I tell you. And I think he's picked up the esoteric truths and he's put it together, and he's nearly drove himself crazy writing Beelzebubs. I think he rewrote it twice before he put it together in its final version. I mean, that's insane. And it's over 1,000, and include everything we need to know in that book would drive any of us nuts for sure. I mean, a very big endeavor,
The alien thing has come up again in my mind when you're just speaking. And someone was asking if you're aware of Whitley Strieber's use of Gurdjieff's teachings, because that all ties in, right?
Yes, I am actually. He's an interesting guy, Strieber. I listened to a couple of things of him, and look, I find him to be quite legitimate. His experiences, very strange paranormal experiences. But I, being a transpersonal counselor, we're open to this stuff, and for sure, I've had my own paranormal experiences in the first house I grew up in. That guy had some strange stuff going on, and I was delighted to hear that he was a Gurdjieff fan, and his experiences helping him to understand what Gurdjieff was saying. Absolutely fascinating. Yeah, that actually highlighted things for me too. So I'm thankful for the listener, because I'm going to go back and listen to Strieber now, so I can tweak what I need to remember there, because it did tweak some stuff in me at Gurdjieff as well, which is really cool. Yeah, so
we also had. Oh, okay, there. We also had who was it? I got scrolled off the screen again. John Lear mentioned that the moon was hollow. He felt the moon was hollow and there was someone living inside it. In fact, I've heard some people say that the moon is a vehicle and it's hollow, and it was actually kind of navigated to that spot. There's your
Yeah.
beings in the moon connection.
Well, there's definitely something to that, because, like I said, the Zulu myths talk about that, and most of, like Credo says, most of the African myths were the same. That, you know, the moon was hollowed out by these beings, and they took it up as their space station. You know, which sounds really crazy for us, but you know, Gurdjieff had a lot of emphasis on the moon, and that, you know, it was sort of feeding on the consciousness of humans here. But also, he what confused me though, I used to talk about the moon, having to on the moon ourselves as part of our awakening, which you know, I'm still unpacking what he's alluding to there, because he's hidden the meaning. But look, I mean, yeah, it all ties in. Yeah, a lot of the alien stuff that's so popular now, I don't buy into a lot of it. But look, if anyone wants to understand it more, just go read the Nag Hammadi texts, because the Archons are describing to you what they are. I've seen them myself in a very deep state one type. I was in one of my meditation classes. It's just a hatha yoga class, and I saw what one of the Gnostic descriptions might be. Robert Stanley, another guy, he's got a perfect depiction of what they are. But you know, the Nag Hammadis are describing what they are, and you know, I think the modern trend in aliens is just, you know, a lot of it's wish-wash. But you know, if people want to learn more, just read the Gnostic text, because when I read them, they were shocking for me. You know, it's like, wow, you know, that's
They're a
what's been
trip.
suppressed. They're a trip.
Yes,
It's
I
good
love
stuff.
reading. I still love reading. Yeah, it's again, like Gurdjieff, it's an experience. It's not going to be something a rational mind's going to accept. It's
No, you're going to
something
lose sleep. You know,
yeah, yeah, especially
I
when you
read the
realize how
Apocryphon of John, and I was like, wow, okay, you know.
yes, the deck is
Yeah,
stacked and how crazy it is.
it's not good to read that at 12 o'clock at night. It's like, I'm not going to sleep for a while, you know. So
No, no, not at all. And as we
no.
get to the end, I know Oswald had a question. I don't know if you could answer it. What did Gurdjieff think of environmentalists or nature? Did he have a stance?
Interesting. He definitely, you're tweaking my memory, but I know there is references, and you know, he wasn't one of those guys that was, you know, forgetting about the earth or the importance of the earth. We need environmental health, you know. But it just comes back to the shamanic understanding that this is a living organism, actually. You know, I think in Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous, I think there's a couple of questions that, you know, followers had put to Gurdjieff about that. I can't quite remember, but there's no doubt, you know, Gurdjieff was a very, you know, sensible, you know, intelligent, smart man. So obviously he's not going to be one to say, well, yeah, you know, who cares about pollution and, you know, all the emissions from the cows and stuff. And yeah, you know, they're living being. You know, Jung was saying the same thing. So there's going to be reverence there. There's absolute reverence there. But I haven't got all the quotes off the top of my head. But you know, the only thing I might say though is that he probably wouldn't have been so suckered into the green agenda, so to speak, which is a little bit hijacked these days. I don't know about in the States, but it's hijacked here in Australia.
Yeah,
You know,
somebody's getting rich off of it. Let's put it that way.
yeah, you know, there's a lot. The Hasnamassians are just in there as they are.
Yep.
On the left, spoiled with the Hasnamassian parasitical consciousness, as Gurdjieff would say. So you have to be discerning with that. But look, you know, from a guest, yeah, he's going to be a guy that's for the earth. You know, he loved animals. There's some really amazing pictures of him with dogs and stuff. So he's a loving man. Gurdjieff was a loving man, you know, but he was a hard teacher too. Absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Well, I think any last questions for Travis? Do you have, Vance?
Not for me, but I did see one there's so many questions tonight, from D.E. Saccone. who, how does authenticity tie in with the will? That sounded like an intriguing one.
That's a nice one. Well, Gurdjieff was all about authenticity, actually. I made a lot of comparisons with Gurdjieff and the existentialists, especially Heidegger. Authenticity. How I pictured it is, he's talking about all these Hastamassian people. This is the inauthentic existence, the Hastamassian pseudo-reality. The will is actually is absolutely tied into becoming more authentic person and breaking out of that conditioning, you can say. In Heidegger's language, the inauthentic people, the collective, the herd, the they, in brackets, was called Das Man. So there's a nice kind of parallel between those two, The Hastamassian is the inauthentic existence, It's like a virus. It's contagious, inauthenticity. So strengthening your will, you will be strengthening authenticity, or the more authentic you become. There's lots of micro examples of this. There's people I know that are involved in yoga. There's a lot of vegetarianism that's associated. I know people that they're trying to be vegetarian, and then they go out for dinner with their friends, and then they get all self-conscious about being vegetarian. They haven't got the willpower or the authenticity to say, no, I don't want to have that steak with you guys. I'm just going to have my veggies or my.
Did the vegans get Travis this time?
Yep.
Or the cattle ranchers, or one side or another.
The internet. He'll be back.
He'll be back. Yeah. Well, we are towards the ending, so I do a little house cleaning again. Thank you very much for being here, audience. There you are, Travis. Yeah, we lost you. We're just wrapping up here. Unless you have something else you want to say.
No, it's been good. It's great questions and really enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you. I know John Barker was asking, do you have a website? I'm like, oh my God, Travis barely has a computer. So hopefully he'll fix that. He'll get a book out. He'll get a website, a new computer. So, because as you can see, at least here in North America, there's a lot of interest and people have a lot of questions about Gurdjieff still after all this time.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So, you can.
Like I said to you, he's still a recent guy. He didn't die that long ago, so I'm not surprised. A website is on its way, and a book is on its way. It's all getting there.
Wonderful. Well, we will definitely have you on when the book comes out. We'll have a nice audio interview and really unpack and really go the distance, make it an epic moment. And but to the audience, thank you very much for being here. Again, the audio version of this, the partial, will come out in your favorite podcasting provider in a couple of days. It will, the full one with a bonus, which I will mention right after this, will come out for AB Prime members and patrons at Patreon. And again, please continue to support this heresy, this red pill cafeteria, because you don't get these topics anywhere else on the internet or meat space here at Aeon Byte. We bring those Gnostic mysteries to a modern meeting for you and only you. But Travis, thank you very much for coming on Aeon Byte. Really enjoyed it, and I know the audience enjoyed it too.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Miguel. I've been a big fan for a long time. You're a great guy. I think this is the best Gnostic radio thing online in the world. And I think you've delivered everyone a really amazing Gnostic service. So I'm very honored. Thank you.
Thank you. No, the pleasure is all ours. And of course, yes, Aeon Byte wouldn't be Aeon Byte without the Moondog Vance. So Vance, thanks for participating here in this fourth way.
Oh, thank you very much. It's always fun, always educational, and proud to be a part of Aeon Byte.
Yes. Well, thank you, audience. I hope you enjoyed it. And as I always say, thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real. Good night, everyone. And hello and goodbye as always. Do, do, do.